Welcome back to the Developer Odyssey episode number 11. This one's titled Frontend Fun. Now, if this is the first video that you've seen in this series, I would highly recommend that you click the link to the playlist down below in the description of this video, and you'll be able to see all the videos in the playlist so far. And I highly recommend you start from the beginning and work your way through, just so you're kind of following along with us how we're doing it. But of course, feel free to click on and watch any of those videos that you'd like, or any other videos on the channel if you would like. So this video and the next video, we're going to be talking about the two different sides of web development, and that's the front end and the back end, or the client and the server. And if you're not familiar with those terms, check out episode 7, where we talk about how the internet works kind of at a high level, and that will explain a little bit of what we're talking about as far as front end versus back end. But also we'll talk about that a little bit more in detail here in these two videos in episodes 11 and 12. If you have just started learning code, or maybe you've already learned some of the basics of writing code, especially web development or web application development, you probably started the same way that I started. I started many years ago, over 20 years ago now, with HTML. And of course, HTML has grown since then in all the different things that it does. But HTML is kind of the basic thing that you first learn when it comes to web development, when it comes to learning how to be a developer, learning how to code as a developer. But there are multiple languages that are actually part of front-end development, and we're going to talk about those a little bit here as we discuss this topic of front-end fun. First of all, though, we have to answer the question, what exactly is the front end? What do we mean when we say the front end? And again, if you don't understand front end versus back end, check out episode 7. But basically, the front end is everything that you see, everything that you interact with when you go to a website, or when you pull up an app on your phone, or when you go to a web app somewhere on the internet, whether when you use Facebook, or you use Twitter, or you use any of those different types of things. The things that you interact with, the visualization, is what we call the front end, or we call that the client. So when you're on your computer is the client, or your phone or your tablet is the client. That's the front end. That's the thing that is visually showing you, and the thing that you're interacting with the most. And there are generally 3 programming languages, sort of. We call them languages. Not all of them are actually languages, but there are kind of 3 different types of coding that are generally used in order for us to be able to see those things, in order for us to be able to interact with those things on our computers, or on our phones, or our tablets, or whatever else. Those 3 languages are HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And you're probably sitting here going, HTML sounds like an acronym. It is. CSS sounds like an acronym. It is. JavaScript is not an acronym. But we have a couple of weird terms here that you may not be familiar with. You may not understand what they mean. So let's talk about those very quickly. What is HTML? Well, HTML simply stands for Hypertext Markup Language. So this is a language, and it's a markup language. So basically, a markup language is basically a formatting language. So you can use markup a lot of times in different social media posts. It lets you like make things bold or italics, or add emojis, things like that. That's all markup code. And so basically what you're doing with markup is you're formatting something. You're giving a format to the client so that it renders it, or it displays it the way that you want it to be displayed. So with HTML, what we're doing is we're saying, hey, this is the format for the page. These are all the different pieces of the page, or what we call elements of the page, and I want them to be formatted in this way. It's almost like if you're building a building, it's almost like it's the bones, the structure of the building. It's the basic layout. It's the architecture of that building. And so we have, when we look at a website, for example, this Google tab here, that's just kind of a search page, we can see these are all of the HTML tags, and these tags give the instructions to the web browser as to how it should structure this web page. So if we go down from top to bottom, you're going to see generally different things get highlighted here. So here's our div content, right? So this is the content area, And then we've got some other things out here that you can't really see, scripts and things like that. So inside our content area, we've got this iframe. We've got here's the logo here. I'm gonna just keep going down. Here's the search bar, and there's some other things actually I deleted before I ran this video, which is fun because you can actually go in here and delete things too on a web page. It doesn't actually delete them. It just deletes them from your version. If we refresh it, it will come back. So if down here, there's this little customize Chrome button. I can actually click on this and delete, and it goes away. Because the HTML is telling it these are all the different structures, the things that I want on the web page, and generally it's displayed in order. So this is giving us the structure, the items that we want to display. So that's HTML, hypertext markup language. And as you can see, it's a certain style. So you've got all these different tags, and I'm not going to go into that. You can learn that when you learn HTML. But basically the markup language, the HTML gives us the structure of the page. The second piece of that is CSS, and that stands for cascading style sheets. Or basically the idea is this is the styling of the page. This is what makes the page look good instead of just having a bunch of boxes. If we got rid of all the styling on this page, we would have a very ugly Google search page. It would still probably function. I haven't tried it, but it would be very ugly and we would not like it very much. It just would not be pleasing to the eyes. But CSS gives us the ability to make something look nice. It gives us the ability to do things like these rounded corners on boxes and on buttons and things like that, and give us specific colors for different items on the page, including like this background. So we could click on this background and see that we've got all of our different styles. If you notice right here, this says styles. And so we can see all the different styles, and these different styles are going to change how things look. So I just unmarked this color, and the logo color changed there. So I turned that off, turned that on. I could actually change this color if I wanted to. So like, let's do, and make this here. There we go. So we completely changed the color now of what that was before, which I don't remember what it was. So we'll just leave it the way it is. So CSS is style sheets. And these are typically extra files that get included into the page when it gets loaded, and it uses a cascading view. So again, it's reading from top to bottom. So any styles at the bottom override styles that are written at the top. So if you wrote a style for this logo further down to change the color, it would have precedence. That's why it cascades. We're not going to get into a whole lot of detail about CSS. Again, I'll let you learn that in class, but just so you understand, CSS is the styling, or what makes it pretty. And then we have JavaScript, and JavaScript is like the functionality of the web page or the functionality of the application. So it's going to actually do things. For example, it might do something when we click on this. You notice that extended a little bit. There's some JavaScript that's waiting for us to start typing something like Dev Mentor Dave. And the JavaScript is making calls to the back end, which we'll get to in a different video, but the JavaScript's making calls, and it's adding this information and updating this content here. So the JavaScript gives us functionality in our web page. Otherwise, it's just a static web page of information. So the building blocks of the front end are HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And those are the three languages that you're going to have to learn for sure if you're going to do any work on the front end of a website or a web application, or oftentimes even like mobile applications and things like that. You're going to need to learn HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So what are some of the pros of doing front-end development? Now, the nice thing about doing front-end development, one of the fun things about it, is you can actually see the things that you're doing while you're developing, while you're making changes. Plus, you don't necessarily have to have a lot of other software running on your computer. You don't have to have extra servers or anything like that. Everything can be done right there on your computer, because really all you need is a browser in order to display what it is that you're working on. So learning front-end code is a lot easier just from a tool standpoint than sometimes learning backend code. You get to see what you're actually developing right there in real time. You can refresh the page and everything that you've changed will be there. Now, it may or may not work depending on how well you wrote it, but it will be there. You get kind of real-time feedback. Whereas sometimes with backend stuff, you have to wait for things to compile depending on what kind of language you're working in and deploy to some degree. And so it can be a lot more tedious to work on the backend things, and you don't get that immediate response. You don't get that immediate feedback. Another pro of working on the front end is that you can easily share that with other people. They can see it. They can give you feedback on the work that you've done. It's something, the front end code is very easy to understand for the most part. It's not an extremely difficult starting point. That's one of the reasons why a lot of boot camps and things like that start with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, because it's visual, because it's fairly easy to pick up and understand. JavaScript's probably the hardest part of it, because it's actually a programming language. So if you're a visual person, if you like being able to see what you're working on and interact with it, that's probably a good place for you to start. And maybe that might be the focus where you really want to be for the most part, is the front end, because you have that immediate interaction. Now, there are some cons to front end development. The first one is that the quality of front end development is often very subjective. Because it's a visual thing, how well you did at it is basically subject to the person who's viewing it. Multiple people can have completely different ideas and opinions of how well a page is designed. And a lot of times you have to build the web page to a very specific design. And people are very picky about making sure that you're exactly right in the way that you've designed this to look exactly like the designs that were given. Along with that, you also have to deal with multiple sizes of screens. So you may have wide screens, you may have kind of normal desktop screens, laptop screens, tablet screens, phone screens, because all these different size screens are going to be interacting with your content. You're going to have to learn how to manipulate that so that it is responsive to whatever screen and still looks good on whatever screen size it's on. So hopefully that just gives you a good high-level overview and you understand a little bit better what it's going to take to become a front-end developer. And honestly, there are things called full-stack developers, and those people who are full-stack developers have to do both front-end and back-end. So there's a good chance you're probably going to need to learn HTML, CSS, and JavaScript if you're going to work in web design or web application development. Hey, if you find this content helpful, please click the like button and click the subscribe button if you're not subscribed, and click the bell icon to be notified the next time we upload another video to this series or just another video here on the channel. Thanks for spending time with me today, and I'll see you on the next one.